and I hadn't heard back, and everybody kept asking me, how do you feel? What do you hope? And I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure, do I match? Do I hope I don't match? Do I hope somebody else matches first? I really didn't know. And then it was about January, I hadn't heard. So I emailed Bree and I said, I hope I'm not bothering you. I just haven't heard. I'm thinking it might be, no news is bad news in this case. She called me back within a few hours and she said, you're wrong. I had just pulled your file to call you. You did match. I'm going to start crying because I immediately started crying then. Mm-hmm. And, that was my answer.
Yeah.
That was my answer to what do you hope? I hope I matched, and I did. So. Yeah.
You are listening to The Wisdom Project, a podcast produced by the Louis B. Nunn Center for Oral History in the University of Kentucky Libraries. I'm Doug Boyd. According to the National Kidney Foundation, of the 123,000 Americans currently on the waiting list for a life-saving organ transplant, about 101,000 of those need a kidney. But only 17,000 people actually receive one each year. This episode features interviews I conducted in 2023 with two remarkable people, one who donated her kidney and one who received that kidney. As an oral historian and the director of the Nunn Center, I've interviewed a lot of people, but the interviews featured in this episode, they're different. For these interviews, I was sitting in front of two of my childhood friends, talking about something I knew nothing about. I've known Dan Becker and Laura Ottaviani Chacon for decades. Elementary school, junior high, Turpin High School. Danny and I were friends, but not super close. Laura, on the other hand, she was my best friend. The Ottaviani house was my home away from home. Then we all grew up in different directions. Life happened. College, marriage, kids, careers. And like many friendships from that era, before cell phones, before social media, we often found ourselves out of touch. But lately, we've started to see a lot more of each other, thanks to a kidney transplant, among friends. And if you haven't figured it out, that is why I'm interviewing my childhood friends. Shortly after this series of interviews in 2023, Laura Ottaviani Chacon donated a kidney to Dan Becker. I was particularly fascinated by this story, really from both perspectives, the donor and the recipient. You heard the national statistics earlier. For Dan, those numbers have never been abstract. Kidney disease has shaped his life for as long as he can remember. Let's go back to the beginning.
I was born with a congenital birth defect where my ureters never reached my bladder.
Both?
Yes. Left was worse than right. So they did about 9 or 10 reconstructive surgeries. My right native kidney functioned a little bit better than my left, but they both were destroyed from what's called hydronephrosis.
Was this like instant, like as a
Yeah,
as
they
an
didn't
infant?
think I'd make my first. They didn't think I'd live after I was born, like the day I was born.
How many surgeries in the beginning?
About 9 or 10. So I had quite a few surgeries, and then I had a transplant when I was actually, ironically, June 10th of 1979 was my first transplant.
So you'd have been around 9 years old at that point.
Yeah.
And
so that was at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. That was a cadaver. A gentleman was 27-year-old, passed away in a motorcycle accident in Des Moines, Iowa.
By the time Dan reached his 40s, he had already been through multiple transplants, dialysis, sitting in a room with other patients, watching the realities of kidney failure up close. How, as you have progressed, say, out of college, or even before college, how aware were you of this idea of mortality?
From a very young age, to be honest with you, I remember, and I've even talked about this in therapy, is one of my first friends was at Children's Hospital, and I remember playing with one of those harder, you remember the larger horses that, like for the Lone Ranger, I remember playing with one of those figures, and I remember asking, and I don't even remember the kid's name anymore, but I remember he looked like the Dennis the Menace that were in black and white. Mm-hmm. Remember those?
Yeah.
And I had gone to his room, and his bed was made up, and everything was gone, and I remember he had passed. Mm. Ugh. And that was my first experience with mortality. And this was pre-9. This is probably 8 or 7 years old or younger.
Wow.
That's probably the first time I remember experiencing loss from a death standpoint. But I never thought of myself as being close to death until this last transplant. And that's how I ended up doing this marketing program, because I actually did it more so this last transplant.
So when you said the last one, you had one at 9, you had one at 35.
And one at 45.
So 45 is the one that you say was the first time you're sort of starting to
look at my own mortality.
Mm-hmm. Dan Becker had his first kidney transplant at age 9. He had his second transplant at age 35, and then his third transplant at age 45, and this last one at age 53. I really knew nothing about the transplant process. So I was asking Danny all kinds of seemingly dumb and basic questions about the disease and the process. But one thing I knew nothing about that really stood out to me was the marketing aspect. You essentially create a marketing plan to get that next kidney. Dan's story of his transplants really is an interesting reflection on marketing approaches over the past 20 years. For previous transplants, there were letter-writing campaigns and yard signs. For one of the transplants, the story got picked up by a local news station, and because another high school friend worked as the news director at a television station in Cincinnati, it got picked up by national news. But what I've never thought about was how critical the timing of that marketing plan is along the trajectory of your kidney's failure.
The key is to do the marketing in enough time that you don't have to go on dialysis.
Mm-hmm. But before you do marketing, you get put on a list, right? And
no, you can start the marketing wherever you want. You have to time the marketing so it hits at the peak optimal time where you're put on the list. So,
right.
So I'm at 20%. I think I started the marketing at like 22%. Mm-hmm. I started to let it trickle on Facebook or whatever. But it's really about timing your marketing campaign because you want it to peak. Because if I would have done this 3 years ago or whatever, someone would have said I have a kidney, but then I couldn't have gotten the transplant, and then they could have been like, my life circumstances have changed. I can't do it anymore, or whatever.
Right. So, but back to this idea of a list. There is a list, though, right? That you're on.
The list. It's over 100,000 people. And
so, is there just the idea that, is there just not a whole lot of faith put in the list in the sense that like it's such a long shot?
The list. There's so many people on this transplant list. It takes the waiting list is approximately, depending on your blood type, between 5 and 8 years.
Wow.
So.
And you said the lifespan on dialysis
is 5, so you could do the math.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't do this marketing plan at age 45 until I had already started dialysis. And I was like, out of desperation, I'm like, I cannot emotionally, physically handle doing dialysis for the next 5 years.
At 45, Dan knew waiting silently on a transplant list that could take years wasn't going to work, so it was time to go into marketing mode again. But when social media emerged on the scene, the marketing plans and the distribution of the message were taken to a whole new level. The plan worked, and he gets his kidney at age 45. Now, there's a lot more to that story. There's a lot more to the story of all of his previous kidney transplants that are in the full interview. However, for this episode, we're going to fast forward. Dan finds himself once again in his early 50s with a failing kidney.
So it started out with my numbers had started to go, and I don't know what I said or something like that. Gwen Koenig, who was Gwen Berger, she did a GoFundMe to raise money for signs.
So the GoFundMe to raise money for signs at that point
was just the beginning of because I had done signs.
But your numbers were going, and were you on dialysis at that point?
No.
But you knew
I've
it was
never
coming.
been on dialysis for this particular campaign.
Okay, so you knew it was coming, though.
I was right, and I knew that I did not want to go on dialysis.
Yeah.
Because also, as a single person, then I would lose my job, and I would be on Medicare, and I wouldn't be able to pay my house payment.
Right.
So there's so many, I've got 2 kids, blah, blah,
Yeah.
So Dwayne buys Brandstetter buys 10 signs.
So Dwayne Brandstetter is again somebody we went to high school with.
Who has a roofing company called Kager Roof.
Yeah. And he hears about this on
social media.
Yeah.
So he buys 10 signs. This is probably October, November of this past year. And then like around the 20th of December, he's like, hey, send me a picture. I'm like, what do you want a picture for, or whatever? He sends back this proof of a billboard that he's building. He's like, surprise, Merry Christmas. And he does a billboard right in front of like Nagel and Beachmont.
Which is a very heavily trafficked
area. And again, I have 2 news stations pick up the story of like who in the right mind puts a billboard up for kidney transplant.
Yeah.
So then we approach that story with how generous, because I want Dwayne to be the story here, not me, of the generosity that, again, I hadn't seen Dwayne in 30 years.
And were you and Dwayne close?
No.
Yeah. So
no.
It's amazing.
We were in no activity together.
That's amazing.
Not one.
Yeah.
So the friends rallied. Thousands of people probably drove past that billboard every day. However, as it turns out, the stars aligned, and ultimately, it was a Facebook post that found its way to Laura Ottaviani-Chacón's Facebook feed.
So the only social media that I have is Facebook, and I saw a post, and I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was something to the effect of, some of you guys have been asking, like, who do I contact if I'm interested in testing? And so he put the name of the donor advocate. And so that was back in October. I contacted Bree at Christ and got the ball rolling. First step is easy. Fill out paperwork, just see, what it all entails. And it's a process. You have to get your insurance lined up, your boss lined up, make sure that you can take the time off. I'm a teacher, so it's a little bit easier. It just happened, excuse me, it just happened to plan over the summer. If it had been not in the summer, I still would have done it then. But the stars really aligned with this process. It's crazy how things really just lined up. Excuse me. So filled out the paperwork, had blood drawn in November, and I hadn't heard back. And everybody kept asking me, how do you feel? What do you hope? And I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure, do I match? Do I hope I don't match? Do I hope somebody else matches first? I really didn't know. And then it was about January, I hadn't heard. So I emailed Bree and I said, I hope I'm not bothering you. I just haven't heard. I'm thinking it might be, no news is bad news in this case. She called me back within a few hours and she said, you're wrong. I had just pulled your file to call you. You did match. I'm going to start crying because I immediately started crying then. Mm-hmm. And, that was my answer.
Yeah.
That was my answer to what do you hope? I hope I matched, and I did. So.
Yeah.
Okay. At this stage of the interview with Laura, I am fascinated by the psychology of the moment. It's one thing to test to see if you are a match, which is typically a long shot, but to find out you are a match, and on top of that, a match that could save the life of a high school friend, that's a moment. That said, what I learned is matching is really just the first step. Laura then had to go through months of intensive testing to ensure that she was in optimal health and can survive with only one kidney, and that there were no underlying issues that would eliminate her candidacy.
And it's a marathon. It's a long day of testing, and it's a lot.
Like, what do they test?
So had blood drawn. I don't know everything they tested, to be honest, because when I look into my chart, there are like, I don't know how many results, and I don't know what most of them are. But they drew a lot of blood, chest x-ray, EKG. I ended the day with a CAT scan with contrast, which is not my favorite thing in the world. That was not good. But also in that day...
What did they CAT scan?
Kidneys.
So they were CAT scanning the kidneys,
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that's also one of the reasons that I chose to do everything up in Cincinnati, so that I was in the same hospital. It ends up we're going to be next door. I don't know, like we'll be in the ORs right next to each other. I could have done this in Birmingham at UAB, but I didn't want to chance my kidney going into a cooler and somehow being transported.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, but yeah, that's what they do.
And if I chose to do the surgery in Cincinnati, so all the testing is in Cincinnati.
Which is logistically very challenging because you're a teacher in Birmingham.
But like I said, things lined up.
It's amazing. So Laura is being comprehensively analyzed from head to toe for any underlying conditions. And there were a few challenges along the way.
So wait for the results. They did find a spot on one of my kidneys, and it was small. They thought it was a cyst. But they wanted to confirm it was a cyst before we could go to committee. So it was so small, a sonogram wouldn't pick it up, so I had to come back up for an MRI. It was fine. It worked out that it was, May 31st, school ended. So I came up, had the MRI and with contrast, and it was confirmed to be a cyst. And my sister went with me, and she was the one that helped me stay calm, make it through. And then we met Danny afterwards.
Have you ever had an MRI before?
No.
Yeah.
I had not. I just kept thinking, do this for Dan, just suck it up,
So you match, you have passed this initial test.
Mm-hmm.
You and he are in contact.
Mm-hmm.
What are conversations like between you two?
He texts a lot, how are you feeling? Are you okay? He texted when I pulled in that morning for my marathon day, because it was a long day. I had just pulled into the parking lot, and he texted something, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's always supportive. It's just like, I'm thinking of you. How are you? Are you okay? So it's always supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So at what point in the timeline are we at?
So this was, that wasn't May. This was March. And then I can't remember. That wasn't May 31st when I came up for the MRI. That was the other date. But I can't remember what date that was. So after we got the result that it was just a cyst, we did go to committee the next Thursday. And so, Danny and I knew Thursday what was happening that morning. And so I was at school, but I saw the 513 number, and so I ran as soon as I got it. Bree called me and said that it was just a cyst. That's what they were hoping for, and we're moving forward. And again, my head started spinning. I probably started crying at school again. And I asked, am I allowed to tell him? And she said, yes, absolutely. And she said, well, let me call his advocate so that she doesn't take that away from you, that you can tell him, and then let me know, then they can contact each other. So I called him, and I said, hey, Danny, what are you doing on June 13th? And it was a few seconds of silence. And then he, I can't remember exactly what he said. I think he said, I was thinking it might be that day. And so, that was that.
I asked Laura all kinds of questions about the process. But what I really wanted to know from my friend Laura Was she at all hesitant or scared? Talk to me about... I know, I'll say it again, you don't have any hesitation at this point, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm nervous. I am scared.
Okay.
I am scared. But I don't have any doubts.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you scared of?
Well, the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which, fair. Absolutely.
Honestly, I'm more scared of the IV ahead of time than the actual surgery because I'll be out for that. It's the IV.
Are you scared at all about having one kidney?
No.
Okay.
No.
Good.
I just feel like, everything, yes, there were some stumbles, but I just feel like the timing and everything that happened, first, my advocate graduated with my nephew, and then for the blood draw, I had to be in Cincinnati that week anyway. And then I emailed her the day she pulled my file to call me. Spring break was when the first appointment. I just feel like the stars aligned for this.
The stars did align throughout the process, but I do want to just emphasize how amazing it is that she had no hesitation. If you know Laura, you know that when she makes up her mind to do something, she usually does it, so I'm not surprised. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about surgery.
We had a really nice dinner the Sunday before surgery, and so both families could kind of get to know one another, and it felt almost like a marriage kind of thing. Like it really did, and we had a 7:30 a.m. ceremony.
That's right.
But nobody really was invited.
Right, it's a small wedding.
I love that.
And then on the way, Laura went in first, maybe 5 or 10 minutes early, so we took pictures because I could see her get wheeled by, so they stopped the bed, and we gave the thumbs up, and she went on, and then when I remember laying in the bed, or on the table, and I think the last thing I remember is like, where's Laura? And they're like, right behind that wall.
Oh, you did ask?
Yeah.
Aww.
And then I was out.
So I mentioned at the beginning that I interviewed both Dan and Laura, but I then interviewed Dan and Laura together after the surgery. After the surgery, the focus shifted to recovery, medications, monitoring, healing, but something else had shifted too. You guys talked about this as like a marriage, and I feel like we need to come up with a different word. There's like because it's like, seeing you, Laura, you lost a kidney, but really, I think have gained this different relationship one you had before, but it's been transformed. And Dan, you really truly have been given the gift of life and whatnot. So there's got to be like this amazing word that we'll come up with later. But I think that I think at this stage, I know you guys have already done this, but I'd love to hear what you all would like to say to one another at this point. Laura, I'm going to start with you.
Put me on the spot.
It's just these are our vows now, right?
It's like your vows, I know. We don't have to hold hands, but Laura...
I don't know. You put me on the spot.
Yeah, it's okay. We're all friends, so I'm allowed to do that.
I know.
Okay, you go.
And I kind of feel like it's a vow. Like I promise to take care of this kidney to the best of my ability, keep it hydrated, keep all, just, because it's harder as a recipient that, or at least I imagine it, like there's pressure to be a healthier person versus a cadaver or whatever, you know what I mean? Because you don't know the person. So, like my first transplant I had at age 9, I went through my college years and I went to Ohio University.
Which we all know.
Which I didn't finish at Ohio University, let's just say that. So just to keep it hydrated and be aware of my physical health.
And I hope when I reach out to you and ask how you're doing, it's not like, are you taking care of my kidney? It's truly, how are you?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't picture that now, but in my head, I had touched upon the last interview when I found out I needed a kidney the hardest part was to reach back to my previous donor and tell her, like, because I had to start this marketing plan, and I didn't want to start it without their prior knowledge.
Right.
So, yeah, I feel more mindful of my health and how to take care of myself and those kind of things. So, and I'm just really thankful.
No.
Like, I'm really, give me a hug.
You're going to make me cry on camera.
Yeah, that's my goal.
You made me cry this morning, so.
They don't make a big deal out of it, but there's an understanding between them now that didn't exist before. I've known Dan and Laura for a long time, but seeing this chapter of their lives unfold really gave me a new perspective on both of them. In terms of interview conclusions, Dan talked about the responsibility of now caring for Laura's kidney. But Laura shifted the conversation to advocacy. About what you would sort of say to others who, hadn't even considered it and suddenly had the opportunity, or if somebody is really on the fence.
Yeah. I would say just because you reach out and get the information does not mean you're going into surgery, the next week. So even if you're mildly considering it, reach out, get the information, start the process. Okay, it's a blood draw. And then you find out if you match. At any point along the way, you can change your mind. So I would highly recommend reaching out, getting information, doing the blood draw, whether it's altruistic or for somebody you know. It's not scary. Every step, it's so small. Every step is so small along the way that you have time, to process and to make up your mind. If you can change your mind. So don't think that by sending in the packet and getting information, or receiving the packet and getting information means you're locked in. You are never locked in. So if you have any thoughts about doing it, start the process for sure.
And as a friend of both Dan and Laura, I'm pretty close to this story, so it was really great to watch my assistant producers on the podcast, Megan Hubbard and Emma Haas, dive in and view this story from a different perspective. Since it's been a few years since I did these interviews, and considering the fact that Megan and Emma have been so immersed in this story, I thought it would be fun to have them reach out and contact both Laura and Dan and talk to them and conduct a sort of where are they now type of follow-up interview, which they did. So I thought it would be fun to bring Emma and Megan into the studio and have them reflect on their conversations with Laura and Dan. For the past month, Emma, you and Megan, you two have been immersed in Dan and Laura's story. I had you both reach out to Dan and Laura to get some life updates. So what are your reactions? I'll start with you, Emma.
It was so sweet to hear about their life updates. I've never thought in depth about the organ transplant process, so I feel like I had a lot to learn from Dan and Laura.
Okay, Megan?
I was really moved by their stories. For me, it was one thing to edit the interviews for the script, but to speak to both of them directly was surprisingly very emotional for me.
Okay, let's have the life updates. Where are they now?
So Dan met his wife a few years before this most recent transplant, and after surgery, he went back to work just 45 days later. And 10 months after the transplant, they moved to Canada to start a new chapter together. He calls himself toxically optimistic, and with the support of his faith, that mindset carried him through recovery and into whatever comes next.
Laura returned to her routines too, work, family, and everyday life, but she also continued to stay involved in the transplant and kidney donation community. She volunteers with organ donation efforts and with the National Kidney Foundation, including participating in their annual kidney walk. She's also involved with Team Alabama for the Transplant Games of America, which will be hosted in Denver this coming summer.
I love that in gaining a kidney, Dan gets the gift of life. And in donating a kidney, Laura's gained something new in her advocacy. Yes, this is a story of triumph. It's a story of extreme generosity. But it's also a story that illuminates the miracle of science, as well as the miracle of life, but also the miracle that is enduring friendship. I'm Doug Boyd. Thanks for listening.
The Wisdom Project is brought to you by the Louis B. Nunn Center for Oral History. We're part of the Special Collections Research Center in the University of Kentucky Libraries. The assistant producers on this episode were Megan Hubbard and Emma Haas. The interviews with Laura and Dan are all available online, searchable in our super cool interface at KentuckyOralHistory.org. Stay tuned for the next episode of The Wisdom Project.